Hey friends, Kris here through the prism of Chrism. I'm tearing the back deck off my house here. It's rotted out. There's areas needing fixed. Hey, a big job. But I have to pause for a second and continue with my teaching on Elijah. Now, today I want to speak on where he guides, he provides. Because remember, he's going to leave the brook Cherith, but God already has provision made in Zeraphath because he'd commanded a widow to sustain him there. Now, the key is you have to leave here and go there. Somebody says anything God can do over there, he can do here. Well, generally that's true, but sometimes he demands a move in your part so that he can move on his part. Let's look at that. Where he guides, he provides. Or another way of saying that the place of his vision is the place of his provision. Pro means out ahead of, and provision would mean that God's already out ahead of the vision. In other words, whatever, he already has plans taken care of it. Well, he wasn't taken by surprise when the brook dried up. God already had everything prearranged. Or another way we could say that, if you are spirit-led, you will be spirit-fed, okay? Number two, there is the blessing, but there's also what we would call the commanded blessing. You know, I like Proverbs 10 and 24, the blessing of the Lord, the blessing of the Lord. It makes rich and he adds no sorrow with it. But there's something even beyond the blessing, and that is the commanded blessing. Listen to Deuteronomy 28 and verse 8. The Lord shall command the blessing upon thee in your storehouses. And Psalm 133 and verse 3, as the dew of Hermon, and as the dew that descended upon the mountains of Zion, for there the Lord commanded the blessing, even life evermore. Now listen, when God commands something, the angels of God get busy. And you remember in Elijah's life, when he was at the brook, God commanded the ravens to sustain thee there. Now he's going to Zarephath as a missionary, and God has commanded a widow to sustain him there. So the good news is you need a God who commands blessing, and he'll do it for you. Number three, if you refuse to fetch, you just might not get the bone. What do you mean fetch? This is a King James statement. 1 Kings 17 and 10. When he, Elijah, came to the gate of the city, behold, the widow woman was gathering sticks, and he called to her and said, fetch me, I pray thee, a little water in a vessel that I may drink. Fetch me some water. You say, sorry, buddy, I don't fetch. Well, as she was going to fetch the water, he added to the demand and said, fetch me a little oil in a cruse and a handful of meal. Now, think about that. Most people would bristle up and say, sorry, buddy, we're not doing business because I do not fetch. But really what was happening, God was testing her. Are you going to humble yourself and obey the words of the prophet of God? You remember the New Testament, the Syrophoenician woman said, yea, Lord, even the puppies eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. If you tell me to fetch, you tell me where and I'm ready to go, okay? Number four, if you want his heaven full, you have to forget your handful. You know, this woman started fussing with Elijah, said, all I've got's a handful of meal. She unloaded on him and said, I'm gathering 2 sticks and I'm going to cook this pancake mix for me and my son, and we're going to sit down in this famine and die. See, she had a bad attitude. She was looking at the impossibility of what she had in her handful instead of looking at the miracle of what God has in his heavenful. And then number 5, sometimes God flies it in, and other times you have to ask for it. Somebody says, what kind of a preacher would have asked this woman for her last handful of meal? Well, listen, it was harder for Elijah to ask for it than it was for her to give it, okay? Sometimes God sends the black raven waitresses with flesh and bread every morning and evening. I love it when God sends it in airmail. But there are other seasons that you have to take up an offering. And so he put out his hand and said, give me a little cake first. Which brings me number 6. You put the kingdom first, the king will put you first. Didn't Jesus say in Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness? That's the first 10%. That's the first hour of the day, the first day of the week. Quit giving God leftovers. Put him first and he'll put you first. And then number 7, you can have your cake and eat it too. Because when she reached in and got a handful of meal, God put another one in. And the prophet said, thus saith the Lord, the cruse shall not fail and the meal shall not waste until the day God sends rain in Samaria. And he and she and her household did eat many days. In other words, for an entire year, there was a sustained miracle, and God provided, because where he guides, he provides. Hope you enjoyed the word. Like if you like, share it with a friend, and tune in tomorrow as we study more on the prophet Elijah the Tishbite.